ceremony will begin momentarily. Please turn off all your electronic devices and rise and remain standing for the national anthem and the invocation given by Chaplain Stevens.
Let us pray. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer of all life. It has been your good pleasure to allow us to know and to serve alongside your beloveds, Stephen, Christian, and Daniel. Their presence with us has been all too fleeting, but our memories of them will burn bright and are your blessing to us. For these fallen we pledge, in the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. From the moment we wake till we fall asleep, all that we do is remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. On the frigid days of winter and the moments we breathe the cold air, we warm ourselves with their memories' embrace and remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. As the days grow longer and the outside becomes warmer, we are more awake and we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. From those times of celebration, love, and happiness, we remember them. Amen. Please be seated.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Major Eric Fritz, and on behalf of the Battalion Commander, I would like to welcome everyone to the memorial ceremony as we honor and remember Chief Warrant Officer 2 Dan Prial, Chief Warrant Officer 4 Christian Koch, and Chief Warrant Officer 5 Stephen Skoda. Before we begin today's ceremony, we would like to recognize our distinguished guest, whom we have in attendance. General Daniel Hokanson, Chief of the National Guard Bureau, and his wife, Miss Kelly Hokanson. Major General Ray Shields, Adjutant General, New York. Major General Tim LaBarge, Assistant Adjutant General Air. Major General Michael Natali, Assistant Adjutant General Army. Major General John Andoni, Deputy Director, Army National Guard. Brigadier General Joseph Beeler, Deputy Commanding General Maneuver, 42nd Infantry Division. Brigadier General Jack James, Commanding General, 53rd Troop Command. Colonel Stephen Rowe, Chief of Staff, New York Army National Guard. Colonel Pete Mailing, Chief of Staff, 42nd Infantry Division. Colonel Sean Flynn, G3, New York Army National Guard. Command Chief Warrant Officer Jackie O'Keefe, New York National Guard. Tony Whitehead, Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief of National Guard Bureau. Command Sergeant Major David Poworski, State Command Sergeant Major, New York Army National Guard. Command Chief Master Sergeant Denny Richardson, State Command Chief, New York Air National Guard. Mr. Joseph Marici from the Office of Secretary of Defense. Mr. Christopher Zeltman, on behalf of Senator Schumer. Mr. John Piletto, attending on behalf of Congressman Joseph Morelli. Samar Brauch, New York State Senator. Adam Bello, Monroe County Executive. Sheriff Todd Baxter, Monroe County Sheriff. James Smith, Deputy Mayor for the City of Rochester. And all the first responders that have supported us through this time. A number of other senior leaders, friends, and most importantly, their family members. Miss Barbara Skoda, mother of Chief Warrant Officer 5 Skoda, and his 4 sisters. Miss Cynthia Aikman, Mrs. Jane Squires, Miss Catherine Skoda, and Miss Deborah Skoda Willett. Teresa DeGamma, wife of Chief Warrant Officer 4 Christian Koch, and his mother Josephine and father David. Gregory and Ann Prial, parents to Chief Warrant Officer 2 Daniel Prial. At this time, we will conduct remarks from the fallen soldiers' company, battalion, and brigade commanders. Ladies and gentlemen, Major Volley Martin, Commander of Charlie 171 General Support Aviation Battalion, Medical Evacuation Company.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for attending. I'd like to start by saying thank you to some of the following organizations: the Mendon Fire District, the Gates Fire District, Monroe County Fire Bureau, Monroe County Sheriff's Office, New York State Police Troop Echo, Jennings Funeral Home, Marvin Vahue, Corey Gates, Andy Cachetta, the National Warplane Museum, Monroe County Medical Examiner, Fishers Fire District, Honeyway Falls Fire Department, the Bushnell Basin Fire Department, Pittsford Fire Department, Monroe County Airport Crash Fire Rescue, New York State DEC Patrol Division, Livingston County Emergency Management, Mount Morris Fire Department, and the Geneseo Fire Department. I'm sure there's others I've missed, but these organizations have been truly exemplary in their support to our formation and families during this difficult time. We sincerely appreciative of all you have done and continue to do for us. It's also a testament to the sheer strength of the community we have in the Rochester area and a confirmation of who these men were. Steve Skoda, Christian Koch, and Dan Prial. We lost 3 of our best on January 20th. When I first came to this company, I was an outsider from Long Island. All of my flight experience was in air assault operations, and it was rather intimidating to take on a medical mission set and all the nuances involved. I truly had a basic idea of what I was getting into, and then there was Steve Skoda. He was no longer in the flight company, but immediately told me how happy he was to have me in the unit and explained that the company needed a change of pace following a challenging deployment. The fact that somebody of his caliber with so much experience would say that to me was very humbling. And even after leaving the unit, he was instrumental in a smooth transition to a new commander. He also provided the tools and continued mentorship for the man who was selected to be his successor, and that was Christian Koch. I vividly remember the first time I met Christian. I was in Baghdad, 2008, when I met a guy my age with a goofy smile, He showed up in our company area. He had a McLovin name tape on his chest. Throwback to Superbad. In his earlier years, Christian was our self-appointed morale officer. He had a knack for making people laugh and bringing everybody together. Fast forward to this time last year when he got wind that I was to take command of Charlie 171, he was the first one to call me. And he welcomed me to the unit. I could sense excitement in his tone, and it made me excited too. We hadn't really interacted in years, aside from a few brief conversations, but we immediately picked back up after where we left off. And we had an undeniable rapport. I knew right away that Christian had matured from morale officer to visionary for this company. Christian was one of the toughest, funniest, and most genuine people I've had the privilege to serve with. He took time to appreciate and acknowledge the small details of life, and I'm honored to call him my friend. Then there was Dan Prial. Dan fit into the company with zero effort. He came to us as a captain, but filled the role of CW2, and he was happy to do so. Due to his medevac and active duty background, Dan's doctrinal knowledge was superior to mine in many ways, and he was able to teach me a great deal during a short time with the company. I did not have the privilege of flying with Dan, and it upsets me that I never will. Dan had the intelligence, humility, and talent to become a foundational player in this facility and in this company. I was looking forward to seeing Dan grow and flourish over a long career in New York. Dan was an officer of the highest caliber and carried more potential than probably any young officer I've ever come across. Each one of these men represented a different phase of Charlie 171 and a valued member of our organization. Steve was a legacy, one that had cultivated and shaped the unit, made it what it is today. Christian was in his prime. He was a leader and a visionary in our organization. He knew the current mission, and he knew its long-term future, and he was instrumental in that. Dan was the new addition and showed more promise than anyone I've ever worked with. He had a true talent to influence those around him and a motivation to succeed. I lost 3 friends on January 20th, but operationally, we lost 3 generations of knowledge and experience. The magnitude of this loss cannot be understated. It cuts deep in many dimensions, but we will persevere. Charlie 171 is one of the most relevant units I've ever had the honor to serve in. It's one of the most active units in the New York Army National Guard. This company has deployed every 3 years without fail as long as I can remember. We are a medevac unit, and our mission first and foremost is to save lives. During the 2 most recent deployments in 2013 and 2019, this company had a total of 611 patients treated. That's more than everybody in both these hangars combined. We've had an average of 50 patients for each stateside mission that we've completed. We make these lives, these saves happen by flying forward towards the violence and landing in hot LZs. We hoist people off roofs next to high-tension power lines in gusty conditions, pull people out of freezing cold rivers, then fly at top speed while providing patient care in the back of the helicopter to the next level of care facility. Steve, Chris, and Dan understood these risks, but above all, they understood that this unit has the most honorable mission and what they were training for. It is for that mission these men gave their lives. I'd like to end by saying it's important to realize that all life is sometimes full of horrible tragedies, catastrophe, and misfortune. You can't have the good without the bad. I found that deeper lows can bring some of the biggest miracles, successes, and triumphs. These things just don't happen on their own, though. The human spirit is one that can embrace either side, the good or the bad, and run with it. So it's my challenge to everybody in this room. Find whatever good, whatever silver lining that can come out of this horrible tragedy. Take hold of it, intensify it, and in doing so, we honor the memory of our fallen brothers. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Major Mike Jameson, Company Commander of Bravo Company, 647 Aviation Support Battalion.
CW5 Stephen Skoda was a remarkable soldier. He was widely known, well-liked, and respected throughout the Army. He had this way of instantly making others feel welcome and at ease. He joined the Army in 1985, before many of us were even born. Last year, in 2020, 35 years later, after joining the Army, he made Chief Warrant Officer number 5. In those 35 years, he did every mission in Army aviation. He did assault, he did scout, he did TAC, and finally medevac. Steve was one of the most dedicated soldiers I have ever worked with. Regularly, Steve would send out an email late on a Friday or on a weekend that he was off. He had no problem, sacrificing his time away from work just to help the unit out. Steve truly cared for whatever unit he was a part of and all of his fellow soldiers. He was never too busy to sit down and talk to you. Even when he had a mountain of work to do, he had some patience and he would talk to you and just, let you vent. When times are challenging, he was one of the people that most of us turn to for calm and grounding advice. While he loved instructing, maintenance was truly his passion. He loved working with mechanics, he loved troubleshooting problems, working long hours, fixing and finally test flying aircraft. He took a tremendous amount of pride in it. Steve, over the years, has shared many, many stories with us, but his favorite ones were always the maintenance ones. Over the years, we've had a lot of fun with Steve. I think many people in the audience will remember a couple different Skoda-isms. There's the Skoda factor, Skoda missions, there's Skoda left, Skoda rights, AR-95 Skoda, most recently some Skoda lifts, but I think Steve would be most proud of the Skoda wagon. Prior to the medevac deployment in 2012 to Afghanistan, Steve was a maintenance officer of the company. He wanted to bring 15 wagons with him, one per aircraft. No one else in the company wanted them. The commander, the moving officer, supply sergeant, everyone was against them. They didn't see the need. They were too hard to order, too hard to ship. There's no rooms in our containers. Not a priority. We're not going to use them when we get over there. We're going to have gators. But Steve, he dug his feet in. He refused to take no for an answer. By the end of the deployment, they were only down to a handful of wagons remaining. Many of them, were broken, and others had to be cannibalized to fix them. They were that important. And many of them were stolen, too, for someone else to use. One of them made it back to Rochester, and we're still using it to this day, 8 years later. And I would challenge anybody who has been in the medevac company in the last 10 years that would not benefit from those wagons. And they'd probably give you a really good Skoda wagon story as well. I'll leave you today with a poem by Colleen Hitchcock titled Ascension. It was found in the last couple of weeks in one of Steve's unit boxes. He had 14 years worth of unit pictures, memorabilia, and he had this poem printed off and in it. And it's in your programs as well. And if I go, while you're still here, know that I live on, vibrating to a different measure, behind a thin veil you cannot see through. You will not see me, so you must have faith. I wait for the time when we can soar together again, both aware of each other. Until then, live your life to its fullest, and when you need me, just whisper my name in your heart. I will be there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Hatch, Commander of the 642nd Aviation Support Battalion.
Today we celebrate and memorialize 3 lives, 3 men who lived to love. It's said that greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his brothers. Steve, Christian, and Dan not only laid down their lives for their friends, but for dozens of soldiers and civilians across the globe. That's who these men were. Medevac pilots whose mission and passion was to save lives. They loved flying. They loved their fellow soldiers. They loved their families. And they loved America. All 3 men served this country and deployed in defense of America, saving the lives of countless soldiers and civilians on the battlefield, because that's the kind of men that these guys were. And they did it willingly. Knowing the risk of flying and going to combat, they chose to sacrifice so that others may live. They love to fly. Steve, Christian, and Dan love the challenge, the beauty, and the thrill of the air. So much so that Dan converted from a captain to a warrant officer so he could focus on that passion of flying. Not only just flying, but flying as a medevac pilot. That was important to him. Just recently, Steve gave me my standards check ride, forcing me to find some obscure procedure in the flip. And he'd do things like that because it was important to him to maximize the knowledge, the skill, and the proficiency of every aviator that he interacted with. The same was true of Christian, who gave me my check ride the year before, making sure to keep prodding my aviation knowledge until he found some sort of hole so that he could shore it up to make me a better pilot. But it wasn't only flying that they loved. They loved the men and women around them. These men made other people around them better, and we are better for knowing them, for flying with them, and for working with them. It's said that love does not seek its own benefit. I recently reconnected with a friend who had Dan as an instructor from Bullock. That's the Basic Officer Leader course. And she told me that Dan was the best instructor she had ever had because of how much he cared. Even after she graduated, Dan followed up with her and her Bullock classmates because he cared and he was invested in their lives. Over the last several months, I've been working with Christian in planning up our upcoming annual training plan. He's put countless of hours into this plan of his own time for this Swiftwater facility at Oriskany. So after he initially briefed me, I had a stern face and very serious, and I told him to go back and do some more analysis. And you know what? That's exactly what he did. He diligently went back and came up with a great product. And he came up with that great product because his heart was there to serve the unit, to train the team, and to make them the best organization that they could be. It's said that it's better to give than to receive. And so Steve, Dan, and Christian certainly gave more than they received. So now, it's for us, the living, that we are dedicated to the great task of honoring their legacies and their memories as we take increased devotion to serving that which they committed their lives to: flying, serving, and saving lives. They are heroes, giving their lives, serving their nation, committed to the mission of aerial medical evacuation, and we will honor them through our excellence of that continued mission. On the evening of January 20th, 2021, over 8,000 flight hours of flying experience was in aircraft 537. Steve, Dan, and Christian. 3 men who loved to fly, and they were good at it. No, they were great at it. They knew how to do it right and how to teach others how to do it right. And so in the words of John Gillespie McGee, whose poem is also in your handout, Oh, I've slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth and done 100 things you've not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting winds along and flung my ear-craft through footless halls of air. Up, up, up the long, delirious burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights and flung my ear-craft through footless halls of air, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while, with silent lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. For those of us that fly, flying is like touching the face of God. And I imagine that now maybe Steve, Christian, and Daniel are touching the face of God. Godspeed, brothers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Michael Charnley, 42nd Aviation Combat Brigade Commander.
Okay, invited guests, dignitaries, soldiers, families and friends of the Black Heart Battalion, thank you for attending today. I feel honored to have known Steve, Christian, and Dan. In a lot of ways, they were the same type of person, but at different stages of their career and life. Speaking today for this event is not an easy thing to do, not something we practice or prepare for, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of them, what I remember, and what I think is important to share. Dan Prial, new guy to the unit, but not new to aviation of the Army. West Point grad, always positive, exhibited selfless service, no airs, transparent, nothing to hide, an excellent athlete, a sports lover, enjoyed walking his dog while exploring his new city. While I did not know Dan that long or as well as Christian or Steve, I quickly gained a sense of who he was. I talked to him many times while he was in the process of transitioning from active duty back to New York. Dan knew exactly what he wanted and did not hesitate to tell me, quote, I want to be a warrant officer instructor pilot in the medevac company. However, you caveated that statement with, but I will do what is best for the organization. It's sort of a staple response from a lot of people, but with you, Dan, you knew he did mean it. He was one of those individuals that was honest, upfront, put others first, and was always in a good mood. Anytime I spoke with Dan, it was always a positive encounter, and I felt better having talked to him. I always knew we were extremely fortunate that he came to the National Guard and into the dust-off community. Anytime I asked someone from Rochester how he's doing, the universal response about Dan was always, great, he is awesome. Christian Koch, in his prime as an aviator, senior and most experienced in the company, completely focused on making his unit and its air crews better. Always remembering to ask about the important things in people's lives, their family and friends. Like Dan, positive, no airs, a genuinely fun guy to be around. Christian always had the look on his face like he knew something funny, but he was not quite ready to let you in on the secret. A great lover of the Cuban sandwich. I remember Christian when we first interviewed him to attend flight school. He was an NCO in Alpha 208 Infantry. He impressed us immediately, excellent bearing, and very comfortable dealing with everyone. Christian took a leave of absence from his studies at SUNY Brockport on less than a week's notice to go to flight school, and then immediately to Iraq with our Air Assault Battalion. Christian was just hitting the peak of his career, CW4, senior instructor pilot in the unit, flying for the state police. He was firing all cylinders, if you will. Christian was also a guy who remembered where he came from, whether landing his helicopter to support the York Public Schools with a static display, or helping to train the ROTC cadets at SUNY Brockport. Christian was always happy to help the people that helped him. Steve Skoda, tremendously skilled aviator and officer, a true mentor, always worked towards the betterment of the soldiers in the organization. Steve could not abide someone who was ungentlemanly. He loved climbing the high peaks as well as his family reunions in the Adirondacks. A classic car aficionado, his favorite was a original '68 Chevy Camaro convertible. Steve was one of the first people I met when I came into the Guard. He helped me make the transition from active duty into the Guard and acclimate to a new city. Always a professional, Steve worked tirelessly at his craft. He always saw the good in people and how they had something to offer the organization. Steve loved maintenance. He loved interacting with the crew chiefs and enjoyed the mental gymnastics that came with troubleshooting aircraft problems. I never did understand his fascination with the aircraft's electrical system, but that is what made him the expert in his field. Steve was always the first to volunteer to assist other units and flight facilities in the state when they needed it. I think he was the only person I knew that did not want to work in operations. Steve would also make sure your families were looked after during deployments. The last time I was out of town for an extended time, he took all of my kids out to dinner just to give my wife a break. That was the type of guy he was. He knew who needed help, what needed to be done, and he took care of it. So I'll ask you, how should we best remember our brothers, and how should we honor their legacy? Like all of you, I'm sad that they physically are gone. I do know they would not want us to spend too much time in mourning them, but to transition to celebrating them now and how they live life. For me, I'm going to do my best to emulate how they approach life. Always strive to be upbeat, be genuine, always seek improvement in yourself and help others to be better. Have fun in life, enjoy your family and friends. Know what is important to the people around you and show genuine interest in them. Be humble, be approachable, treat everyone well, see the best in people, and be a friend to someone who needs a friend. So whether it is savoring a Cuban sandwich, appreciating the beauty of a classic car, or just enjoying a walk down Park Avenue with your dog, I encourage you to carry their legacy forward, who they are, and what they brought to us every day. There can be no better way to honor their memory, ensure they are never forgotten. Yes, I will miss them, but I also hold the best of them in my heart and carry that forward. Thank you.
At this time, we will conduct remarks from friends of the fallen soldiers. Ladies and gentlemen, Major Michael Jameson will pay tribute to Chief Warrant Officer II Daniel Prial.
I'm sorry to say, I did not know Dan for very long. He started working in the flight facility just in this last fall. But you didn't need to know him for very long to know Dan immediately fit into any community he was a part of. In fact, many times he would be the guy that would bring people together. On our first weeknight that he supported our night vision goggle flight training, Dan brought in a crock pot and spent all afternoon cooking ribs. For the next 6 long hours, everyone walking into flight ops smelled the ribs, and their mouths started watering in anticipation. When flight crews landed that night after completing their flight training, they feasted on the ribs, and a new tradition was born. In the 10 years I've been flying to the flight facility, I've never took anything for anybody. Dan showed us all up his first month here. Since that night, others have followed his example. Once a week, cooking mac and cheese, venison stew, pulled pork, things like that. In the last month, many soldiers, family members, community members have asked to cook a meal or to continue that tradition for AFTP nights. So I have no doubt in my mind that we will continue that tradition going forward. Like I said, I didn't know him for very long, but we reached out to the people at Fort Rucker, and Major Sean Ardondo, who really wanted to make it up here and speak, but unfortunately wasn't able to. He sent me some remarks, which I'll read now. Dan Prial arrived at Fort Rucker in the spring of 2017 to Delta Company, 1st 145th Aviation. I, Major Sean Ardondo, was one of the first folks to meet Dan when he came in process. From the very first conversation, Dan was completely honest. We briefly spoke about where he came from, which was 3rd of the 82nd Aviation Regiment, and realized that we'd both pass each other, me on the way out of Fort Bragg, and he on the way in. We spoke about the people that we might have known, and realized we knew several folks. I then asked him what his plan was, and he immediately said that he wanted to revert and become a warrant officer. To which I replied, "Don't tell any of your commanders that until you're absolutely sure." Most officers have been in a situation where they had to keep their plans close to their chest to not remove themselves for other unforeseen opportunities. But that just wasn't Dan. He was unequivocally honest 100% of the time, and that became the quality in him I most revered. He very quickly became every flight school lieutenant's favorite instructor because of his candor, openness, and pure energy. Our battalion commander at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Kent McGregor, he was an absolute PT beast and a diehard Jets fan, just like Dan, so they immediately became friends for life. Dan continued his time at Fort Rucker, literally mentoring thousands of future aviation warfighters. I moved out of Delta Company and took command of Bravo Company, 1st 145th, in March of 2018. And as soon as I moved over there, I hoped that one day Dan would be able and willing to come work with me again. If anyone knows Dan, they have heard about his father's service as a firefighter, and that service understandably drew Dan to the U.S. Army's medical evacuation mission. Once I knew that Dan might be able to move, I started working on a way to get him flying with the Fort Rucker Medevac unit, Flatiron. Luckily, they were open to have extra help, and I sold Dan hard on coming over and working with me with that bargaining chip. He bid it hook, line, and sinker. If anyone is familiar with Bravo Company, they can simply scroll through parody Facebook pages and see there are a lot of shenanigans that go on in that company. It takes a special person to continue to have empathy for over 1,000 people, period, and Dan was absolutely perfect for that job. One thing about Dan that is so amazing was his loyalty. If you took care of him in any way, from getting him some lunch to giving him advice when he was loyal to you for life. I just wanted to see Dan happy and flying medevac, and didn't really understand fully what that meant to me. He worked harder to protect me and take care of the company than any other soldier I have served with in 18 years in the Army, and I will always remember what he did for me and my family. I tried many times to get him to stay in the active Army, but I knew he really wanted to get out and find his purpose. I was so excited for him when he decided to go guard, and even more when he became a technician. We talked about everything from relationships to how to deal with difficult soldier issues, and he always kept it real with me. I truly felt lucky that I was able to make Dan's last 18 months in the active duty Army enjoyable and fulfilling, and I was overjoyed when he sent me pictures of him pinning Chief Warrant Officer 2. The Army needed Dan way more than Dan needed the Army. Dan was such a thoughtful person. I truly loved him, and he's my little brother for life. I'm immensely sorry I could not be there today, and not being there in person to share these words is one of my biggest regrets in my life. Dan and I talked about him giving my son, Kai, a tour of West Point. So Kai and I will do that when I come back from Honduras, and I would love to just meet the people that raised such an exceptional human. To Dan's family, I can't imagine how much pain you are feeling right now, and I know these words won't make anything better, but you raised one of the best people on the planet. And as much as the world is worse for not having him right now, all of the people that he touched will live on in his honor, just trying to be half the man he was. Love you, Dan. You'll be missed by all, and I know you and St. Michael are comparing stories up in heaven. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Major Chris Gagliardo will pay tribute to Chief Warrant Officer 4, Christian Koch.
Good afternoon. My duty today is to tell you who Christian J. Koch was. However, there's no words to describe a man who was bigger than life. Because let me be frank, everyone loved Christian Koch. He was the guy you wanted to be friends with. He was the man in the room that everyone gravitated to. Since his death, I've spoken to so many people who talked about how big of a piece of their lives Christian was. He was the guy that didn't just casually carry on a conversation with anyone. He listened. He remembered everything you said. Look around. Anyone today that's sitting here, they are going to describe themselves as one of Christian's best friends. Best friends because no one else knew that your son was almost done with his Eagle Scout project. No one else asks how your daughter was doing at college. No one that calls to make sure they wished your wife a happy birthday, maybe before you realized it was her birthday. He called to tell you that he loved a picture of the kids. And this was just Christian. This is what he did. And he did it for everyone. Christian Koch was everyone's best friend because he made you feel that way. This personification was who he was. Someone who put everything into whatever role he was filling at that very moment. Whether he was training a new pilot or even an old one like me, Christian assured you we're getting the best of him. He made you listen. He made sure you were aware because he knew the necessities of the job. A few years ago, Christian, along with other members of Charlie Company, flew into the aftermath of Hurricane Florence in North Carolina. It was there that he conducted multiple live hoist rescues of stranded civilians and dogs. He always loved to mention the dogs, from rooftops because of the extensive flooding in the region. I vividly remember a picture of Staff Sergeant Gabriel standing on a rooftop, readying a Stokes basket for an elderly man to be loaded into it, while Christian hovered overhead. The trust that it takes in our medevac community is undeniable. For those of you who have never had the experience of riding the hoist from 100 feet, I assure you it is both nerve-wracking and mesmerizing to think about the level of training on all sides of the aircraft to accomplish these rescues. These skills and training he took into the civilian world by earning a position flying with the New York State Police, where just recently, Christian was recognized by the American Red Cross for rescuing a young boy who had fallen down a cliff in the Letchworth Gorge, just a few miles south of this flight facility. Chris and his team settled into a 200-foot hover, and he was able to send a rescue basket down that hoist and make the recovery. 200 feet, no drifting, no wavering, just confidence in his ability and his team. A feat not many could accomplish. Those things were normal to Chris, and he didn't want recognition. He just wanted to be the best at his craft, and he was. As of late, Chris and I have been sharing stories of potential retirements because we're both pushing that 20-year mark. However, Christian had one last goal. He'd been named the standardization pilot for Charlie Company just a few years ago, and he'd begun developing, as Colonel Hatch had said, a plan to start a HART team here in New York. This is a helicopter aquatic rescue team, a program only ran by 7 other states in the United States. He had studied their programs, and he had begun developing a training plan that was in the process of being approved. Chris would say that this program will save lives, and he wanted to bring it to the New York Army National Guard. The HART team was his final goal before retirement. Now a goal left to us to finish. Even though that was his final goal, what Chris will forever be known to us for is the way he lifted everyone up. If we were at annual training, Chris was the first one to take up a collection for a barbecue. He always wanted to make stickers, t-shirts, and whatever he needed to bring the unit together. Christian would give you the shirt off his own back. And I know that because, well, I have those t-shirts with the big Coke stencil emblazoned across the front of them, as I'm sure so many of you can recognize. When I was the commander of the medevac a few years back, he went to the store, got a cake, because it was my birthday. One of the many birthdays I've shared with the Army. But he took the time. He gathered some of our friends, and he made sure I didn't miss my birthday. It was just who he was. Over the last decade of friendship, I've witnessed an amazing and some almost humorous evolution of Christian. We've talked every single day, and we would share in the changes that life would throw our way. Chris became a father, a husband, and a bonus dad over the past few years. And very quickly, all the other titles he had gained, they just didn't matter anymore. Just this past summer, Christian was sending me step-by-step pictures of this amazing patio that he was being built at the house, and we would exchange some of the most heartfelt words I may have ever shared with my friend, in which he had ultimately realized he had found it. He found what he was looking for all those years: the love of his family. In life, we are defined by our choices. Christian loved to fly. It defined him. It was who he was, and he was the best. If he hadn't chosen to fly, we would have never met. We would have never been best friends. But for some reason, what he loved is what ultimately took it from us. At Chris's funeral, I talked about seeing eagles more than I had ever had. And after the ceremony, I'd gotten multiple messages from people connected to Chris that I may have not been even heard of. And they were sending me pictures of eagles in a story. Everybody had a picture and a story. Stories about him I had never heard. Stories that made me smile. Stories that made me cry. But ultimately, stories that made me remember. When someone passes, people ask, "What can I do?" And I will tell you, tell his stories. Say his name. Take a minute to look up for that eagle, because maybe that's his way to have you say hi to our old friend. Christian left us when he was just accomplishing everything he had worked for his whole life. And I'm forever choosing to think our friend went out on top. Chief Warrant Officer Christian Joseph Koch, I love you, and I will never forget.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Warrant Officer 5, Michael Zangi, will pay tribute to Chief Warrant Officer 5, Stephen Skoda.
Many a year, I've stood behind this podium teaching a class, or two, or three. And after every class, there would always be some source of feedback. And Steve, very quickly, pointedly, would give me the most positive feedback. But there's one in particular that I will remember the most. He said, "Mike, we can hear you. We just can't see you. So stand to the side or stand on a box." I hope he's right. Again, I'm CW5 Mike Zangi, and I'm honored and humbled to have been asked to share some thoughts about our friend and brother, Steve Skoda. Over the past weeks, I've done a lot of thinking about Steve, going back to when we first met 25 years ago, drilling here in Rochester. At the time, we flew together both as Cobra and Huey pilots, mentored and trained by pilots who brought vast experiences from their time in Vietnam. But those are tales left for another time. After he was hired here full-time, we worked together in maintenance for several years before I moved to the safety side of the house and was trained in the CH-47 Chinook. And Steve, he took charge over maintenance, eventually become a UH-60 Blackhawk pilot. We spent a lot of time together during those years, something I'm very grateful for because it gave me the opportunity to get to know someone very special. In trying to write this, I quickly realized that to really know Steve, you had to experience him. There's no pretense. Words won't begin to convey his thoughtfulness, his kindness, his humility, and his sincerity. I fear they won't come close to communicating his vision, the joy he found in educating, and the deep love he had for his family. But Steve also loved the challenge, so I'll do my best to meet this one. Steve was a private man, a quiet man, and behind that privacy and quietness was a man of immense character, deep thought, strongly held beliefs. He always sought to see the best version of everyone he met. One of our former pilots, Jeff Brooks, spoke at the vigil about how Steve would tell Jeff's son stories about his father that made him seem larger than life. He did the same with my daughters, and I'm sure he did for many others. You see, Steve wanted us to see ourselves as he saw us. And although he looked for the good in people, it's not that he never noticed faults. He just noticed them and moved on. Because he focused on your full potential. His belief is, and his vision of you helped you become closer to achieving what you should be. You wanted to be that better person he saw. And in thinking about Steve, I'm reminded of an old story I once heard. It talked about the world being saved from falling into chaos by 36 living, quiet, unassuming lives. The kindness they held, generosity, and deep compassion they had toward others saved us from ourselves. That was him. He was a quiet force, good, that helped us together, keep us together. Steve was generous as he was kind, whether it was giving presents to the neighborhood kids or lending a hand when there was a big project that needed to be done, or keeping an eye on the family of a deployed friend. He was someone who'd give you the shirt off his back, as you've heard, and if he thought you needed it, he gave it to you. And when someone had great news to share, Steve would always be the first to congratulate you with a big grin and an exuberant, "Outstanding!" Steve had a great sense of humor and loved to play practical jokes, but he only allowed the pranks to go so far before he'd become the voice of reason and draw a hard line. And sometimes he'd put his foot down, literally. There was an instant when the guys were passing around a ballpoint pen that gave a shock when you clicked the top. It wasn't a tiny zap, it had a little bite to it. Steve happened to ask someone if they could borrow a pen, and that pen was handed to him. No sooner did he click the top, it was on the floor beneath his foot, being crushed into tiny pieces. He had a great sense of humor, but it stopped being funny to him if he thought someone might get hurt, and he'd end it fast. His quietness disguised a mind that was always moving, always thinking and searching out new information. Once engaged in conversation, he had a way of surprising you with the vastness and the depth of his knowledge, no matter what the topic was. And if it happened to be something that struck his curiosity, he'd come in the next day, happy and excited to share whatever he found on that subject. Ironically, for men who loved to fly, one of the things Steve was passionate about was his cars. He loved cars, especially cars from the 70s. He judged cars by his own standards, his own vision. He didn't buy a car because of its given value in a book. Each car he bought was personal. Each one meant something special, and he didn't care whether anyone else agreed or not. He had fun with them. You could see that attitude demonstrated in the car he drove every day. Steve was the only person I know who put high-performance brakes on a Subaru Outback. And I know if I closed my eyes, I could see him sitting in his garage, beer in hand, surrounded by his cars he deemed unique and special, waiting for some Hollywood producer to come rent them. He took his time with things, thinking them in meticulous detail before acting on them. He could plan things out to such great degree. If he had written it down, anyone could have followed his plans and achieved his ideas completely. I think it was his attention to detail and his ability to take time before acting, his ability to really listen that made him such a source of support. He always seemed to know when I was having a bad day. He'd show up at my house, ready to listen, ready to talk through whatever had happened. He did this for many of us. He had a knack for knowing just what to say. When my oldest daughter was nervous about going away to school, I'll always be grateful how he eased her fears by reassuring her that distance was just a number, that you always carry your family with you. But I think if you really wanted to know Steve, you needed to know his family. You needed to go into the woods. Those were two things that kept him going. Steve loved the outdoors. He enjoyed kayaks, canoes, as much as he did hiking and hunting. I think he would have been the happiest if he could have picked up his house and moved it onto a mountaintop or just in the middle of the forest. The best times for him were definitely when he was able to combine his love of his family and the love of outdoors during his annual trips to the Adirondacks. He felt connected to nature. It wasn't just a place to visit, it was part of him. And he was a part of it. Just as he was deeply connected to his family. Flying was another great way for Steve to experience nature, and he loved to fly. Instead of watching the birds soar from the ground, he could fly with them. Flying gave him a different perspective, a sense of exhilaration and freedom. Da Vinci once said, "When once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned upward. For there you have been, and there you will always long to return." For Steve, flying was a gift, as one he truly cherished. A few weeks ago, Steve's sister Cynthia and I were talking, and she told me that she had once sent a text asking him what Cavu meant, spelled C-A-V-U. Seems an appropriate way to close. May we all find comfort in knowing that Steve's ceiling, visibility, is unrestricted. His skies are clear, and his air forever calm. Fly high, my brother.
Chaplain Stevens will offer words of scripture, a silent tribute, and offer benediction.
We read from the 23rd Psalm. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Please join me in a moment of silence. Please rise for the benediction and the rendering of honors from the firing party and taps. Gentle Shepherd, we thank you for allowing us the honor and delight of sharing in the life of our fellow soldiers and friends, Daniel, Christian, and Stephen. We pray that your rod and staff would guide and protect their military unit, their friends, and their families, all part of your flock. Give us all grace and strength to move from the despair of today to where we may safely dwell with you forever. Blessed are the memories of our friends that we carry with us. May they give comfort to us as we walk through this valley. We ask this in the name of the one who is our great shepherd. And Daniel, Christian, and Stephen, may sweet angels sing you to your rest. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Group, attend! Chief Warrant Officer 4, Dangler. Chief Warrant Officer 3, Seeger. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Metzger. Specialist Watson. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Prial. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Daniel Prial. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Daniel Gregory Prial. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Koch. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Christian Koch. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Christian Joseph Koch. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Skoda. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Stephen Skoda. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Stephen Frank Skoda.
At this time, the official party renders honors. At this time, the family renders honors. At this time, the VIP renders honors. This concludes the formal portion of the memorial ceremony. If you wish to pay your respects, please remain in place until the usher releases you to your right and then exit left. If you must leave at this time, do so. Do it silently by making your way outside the aisles and exiting through the entrance and to your final destination. Your cooperation is appreciated.